Tonight, the Ayanola Council for the Advancement of Rastafari decries the arrest of 2 women for possession of over 300 pounds of cannabis. Wasco is down to about 8 feet of water for the remainder of the drought that is forecast to last for the next 2 months. And the National Workers' Union calls for oversight of the finances of the CCC. We have the details of these stories and more coming up.
This is the Hot 7 Nightly News with Lovely and Amy Joseph.
Good night. It is Tuesday, the 5th of May, 2020. Welcome to the Hot 7 TV Nightly News on Flow Channel 117. The broadcast is also being simulcast on Kiss FM and our Caribbean Hot FM mobile app. I'm Lovely St. Amy Joseph. Thank you for joining us. The president of the Ayanola Council for the Advancement of Rastafari, AICA, is decrying the arrest of 2 females for possession of over 300 pounds of cannabis on Sunday. The advocate for decriminalization and legalization of cannabis says the law is the law mantra is not applicable to such situations. He says with cannabis reform already underway, people should not continue to face harsh penalties for cannabis possession. On Sunday, the 3rd of May, in the community of Prale, 2 females were apprehended by police for possession of a quantity of 359 pounds of cannabis. The arrest has drawn the ire of President of the Ayanola Council for the Advancement of Rastafari, Aaron Alexander. Alexander says a country pursuing a legal framework for cannabis should not be taking punitive action against citizens for cannabis possession.
We are very disturbed by this development because in an age and a time when we are talking about legalizing cannabis, just recently there in the last House sitting we heard that the Honorable Bradley Felix mentioned that he is now in receipt of the report from the commission that was set up, headed by Michael Gordon, and that commission was set up by the government to look into the processes as far as the roadmap towards a regulatory framework for the legalization of cannabis in St. Lucia. That regulatory framework for the legalization of cannabis, it's very much on the table, and the minister mentioned that in the House. So right now it's for the government to show some good faith and some good understanding and some tolerance.
While that argument is impassioned, it does not change the laws regarding cannabis at this time, and police have made it clear that until such time as the law is reviewed, they will continue to clamp down on illicit drugs. Alexander says the matter is not that black and white, particularly given the economic crisis brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic.
You cannot just rely on the law is the law. You know, there must be some heart, you know, where you could say, well, all right, while we're considering doing this, if you catch anybody with cannabis, just take it away from them, but do not arrest them, do not incarcerate them, and you have to ask for bail and all these kind of things now, putting people under more financial stress than we're already in due to the COVID-19 onset of this pandemic. So, you know, the government needs to show some good faith and talk to the police officers and let them know, you know, at this time we cannot be eradicating plantations. We have to look at the local economy. And cannabis help parents to send children to school. It helps them to pay their medical bills. It helps them to pay their utility bills. It sends them on vacation. Cannabis does a lot in our economy. So we need to keep the local economy churning.
Alexander says AICA's position is that all cannabis-related arrests come to a stop until the finalization of the framework for a legal cannabis industry. The water situation looks very grim for the next few months. Just how bad things are were outlined by Wasco officials, who say that this year has been the worst on record for rainfall as compared to the past 6 years. Wasco at present has only 5 to 8 feet of water to manage for the balance of the dry period. The current drought is tough and is about to get tougher. Riding out this dry spell will be a Herculean task for Wasco, given that rainfall and water reserves are at a historic low. Senior Supervisor of the Water Services Department, Timothy James, says Wasco has been monitoring river flows from the start of the year, given that there had been a rainfall deficit of about 50% from last year. James says the data regarding Wasco's water reserves so far for this year is sobering.
We lost about 6 feet of water from the John Compton Dam in March, And to date, in the last 2 months, we have lost about 12 feet of water. Our maximum level is about 343 feet above sea level, and we're now at 321 feet above sea level. Now, all persons know of Hurricane Thomas and our heavy siltation at the dam. And because of that heavy siltation, we do not have the volume of water which would maybe normally keep us right through the drought or the dry period. And so, to put it in summarize it, we literally have between 5 to 8 feet of water to manage throughout the balance of the dry period.
According to James, the next 2 months will be even more challenging for Wasco in terms of managing the water supply. He says all areas will be affected because depleted surface water sources are an issue in all catchment areas.
I know sometimes persons, expect to get water all the time, but we have to realize that, like COVID, we are not in normal times, and we have to do what is necessary to conserve. What we do now to even help the situation at the Babono, at the Hill 20 treatment plant, is to augment the supply by utilizing water from our main source, which is a John Compton Dam, through our Phoebus treatment plant, to augment the supply, especially at night, to help in terms of the customers in the Babono region.
But the John Compton Dam levels have dropped significantly, and other sources have to be utilized, like the Vanna and Ravin Poisson intakes. Wasco has had to decrease the volume of water taken from all sources, but says that is the good news in the north because reserves actually exist to allow Wasco to manage the water supply. The situation in the south, he says, is not as advantageous.
Unlike in the north, we have the John Compton Dam where we have reserve water. In the south, they do not have that. And in the south is as bad or even worse than in the north.
Wasco's communications manager, Sherry Ann Gillard Williams, says the south is acutely affected by the drought, with water sources registering a 40 to 60% decrease in yields. As such, Wasco is not able to meet the demand for water in the south, forcing the company to put in place stringent water rationing measures.
The rationing is what we use to distribute water to various communities, and those that are most affected are consumers in the Patience, Micoud, Deriso, Bellevue, Grace, Beauséjour, Lower and Upper Saltibus, Sauzé, Upper and Lower Font-Saint-Jacques, and Ruby. And in some cases where the rationing system is not enough, we do, as a last resort, employ trucking. So we do have this trucking system in place where we can supply some communities, some residents at a time with water.
Wasco is urging everyone to conserve water, given that water shortages due to the current drought conditions will only intensify for the next 2 months. Bank of St. Lucia recently introduced a customer relief program to provide much-needed financial relief to its affected customers who are experiencing challenges in servicing their loan commitments as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Acting Managing Director of Bank of St. Lucia, Medford Francis, highlights the benefits of the program and addresses some of the concerns of the public. A number of St. Lucians have been negatively affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, and concern and worry is growing with respect to the ability to service loans and, in some cases, where the next source of revenue is coming from. In an effort to alleviate that burden, Bank of St. Lucia, BOSL, recently rolled out its COVID-19 Customer Relief Program, offering customers a moratorium up to 6 months, waivers on late payment fees, reductions in merchant fees, temporary credit increases, removal on penalties for early withdrawals, certificates of deposits, and more. Acting Managing Director of Bank of St. Lucia, Medford Francis, goes on to explain what the moratorium is and how it functions.
A moratorium is essentially the deferral of loan repayments for a period of time. It is not tantamount to the write-off of the debt. Customers who can continue to service their debt obligations are encouraged to do so because the accrued interest component will have to be paid at a time later in the future.
Francis says Bank of St. Lucia is also offering customers a variety of flexible options as to how this accrued interest will be treated.
One such option is that this interest is paid over the remaining life of the loan, and it could be staggered in such a way that the monthly payments are not onerous on the customers. In addition to that, customers will be afforded the opportunity of paying the interest as a lump sum, both at the end of the moratorium or towards the very end of the loan.
According to Francis, bank officers have already begun the process of reaching out to customers who have submitted requests to finalize their relief arrangements. Bank of St. Lucia advises that due to the volume of requests received thus far, that the process will take some time, but the bank wishes to reassure the public that the institution remains committed to providing relief to those affected during this time via its COVID-19 customer relief program. The National Workers' Union has written to Minister for Local Government, Leonard Montoute, to place on record its concern about the operations of the CCC. The union notes that while it is not opposed to the government of St. Lucia providing a subvention to the CCC, the government must ensure that going forward, a suitable representative from the Ministry of Finance is assigned to the finance unit of the CCC to ensure that subventions are managed and accounted for prudently. In the letter, the union reminds Minister Montoute that recently the CCC was the subject of an investigation after serious allegations regarding the handling of the council. The union maintains that the CCC cannot be allowed to fall into disrepute due to a lack of oversight. You're watching the Hot 7 TV Nightly News. Still to come, the National Council on Public Transportation rebuffs claims that Southern drivers are staging protests by not plying the route. Public opinion on when the country and the region should open up borders to incoming flights, and the population and housing census may be pushed back even further given an impending election in 2021.